The spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
What is up, everybody? Kyle here, coming at you from a beautiful Hampton Inn. Oh, does it get more beautiful than the Hampton Inn? Get those Hilton Honor points. I don't know about that, but I'm up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, of all places, here in my hotel room. I had a long travel day today. I got meetings all day tomorrow, doing some work, doing some computer work, things like that up in my hotel. But I was looking at some of the comments in the videos, some messages I've had, and people are saying, Kyle, can you do a video talking about the Dragonfly? Of course, the G.I. Joe classified HasLab Dragonfly, currently going on right now as we speak. And of course, the WCW Monday Nitro stage. Rest in peace, Nitro stage. We do miss you. Still sad that did not fund, of course. People want me to compare it, talk a little bit about it, give the old business hat a little bit, or my business hat, I guess I'll say. And of course, this video is going to be my opinion and my thoughts on the two. Of course, you got your own opinions. Why wouldn't you? Feel free to put them down in the comments down below. But I figured we'd set the stage, talk about it a little bit, talk about the pros and cons, what went right, what went wrong, more so why the Dragonfly succeeded than beating up on the stage, because we've talked about the stage a lot, but we'll talk about both of them here a little bit. But definitely interesting. It really is the tale of two crowdfunds, one successful, one unsuccessful. But really, a lot of people are wanting to put comparisons, but it really isn't apples to apples, in my opinion. These are totally different kind of things, different kind of fan bases. Yes, I understand. There is crossover fan base. Look at me. G.I. Joe Wrestling are my two favorite properties in the world since I was a little kid. So batting 1,000 for me on both sides of these. I was for both of these. Of course, I backed both of these. And there's a lot more to it than that, of course. But it's just a little different. It's not apples to apples on this, and I'm going to explain why. But let's take a look at the facts, the early facts here. Of course, the Nitro stage, we needed 5,000 people to back this thing. Dragonfly, they needed 10,000 people to back this. So totally different, not apples to apples there. Of course, one's Hasbro, one is Mattel. We do know that as well. 11,000 needed for all tiers was the Nitro stage, where the HasLab, we're not even sure. Could it go beyond? They haven't put all their cards out, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we do know the Nitro stage was ending at 11. Who's to say, though, if they would have blown through 11 and they were going towards 12, they might have put a stretch goal out there, but we'll never know. That never did happen, of course. We do know the Dragonfly funded in, what is it, a little day? 25 hours, 28 hours, 30 hours, roughly a day and change. It funded quick out there. Where the Nitro, of course, we had the 30, 40 days to fund. It just didn't happen. It wasn't in the cards, didn't happen. But the Dragonfly funded like that, and there's definitely some reasons to that. Of course, size-wise, 40 inches wide, 20 inches tall on the Nitro stage, a big stage. Of course, we saw that in person. We did video. We talked about it. The Dragonfly, another big one, 2.5 foot long, is on a 10-inch stand. It is a big, big helicopter, but a very, very cool helicopter, and one full of nostalgia. Nitro stage full of nostalgia, Dragonfly full of nostalgia. Definitely agree on that one here. Now, here's where some of my comments and some of my thoughts on these things here. Now, the Dragonfly, G.I. Joe fans are used to big vehicles and big play sets. Wrestling, outside of a wrestling ring, wrestling fans really don't get play sets. We've had a few, we've had little stages, we've had little things in the past, but nothing quite to the Nitro stage. Obviously, we had the new gen arena. I guess we'll call it arena. Basically, that was a ring, and of course, an announcer's table, figures, and then an entrance. And the entrance was big, but it's nothing like that Nitro stage entrance. I think we'd all agree on that. So, totally different world. Both stages, but totally different worlds. Where the Dragonfly, of course, is a pivotal vehicle in the history of G.I. Joe, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, here's the big thing, I think, and I think it really does come down to this. This is one of the big things here. G.I. Joe fans are older. They are of my age for the most part. Yes, there was fans back in the 60s, 70s, I get that, but we're talking about the 80s G.I. Joe fan base. The G.I. Joe fan base of the 80s, people of my age, guess what? People my age bracket, we have a little bit more disposable income. I get it. That's painted with a big brush, of course, but as a whole, that is the demographic that has a little bit more spending money. Of course, older, saving for retirement, getting closer to retirement, they're minding their money. Up-and-comers right out of college and stuff, hey, they don't have any money. We've all been there. We've both been on both sides of that spectrum, probably. But G.I. Joe fans are older, and they got money. They got disposable income, and they are very passionate about the Joe brand. Now, wrestling fans here is an interesting one. I truly do believe, I don't know how we'd ever find this out, I think there is more wrestling fans in the world than G.I. Joe fans. I think there's no doubt in my mind there is more wrestling fans in the world. Now, the problem is, what is the conversion rate? We're talking a little business stuff. How many wrestling fans are actually into wrestling figures? So much so into wrestling figures, they're paying attention to Mattel Creations and all this, and then so much more into it that they're actually pulling the trigger buying that. That is a lot of steps to take to get a casual fan base member to pick something like that up. So there's a lot of steps involved for a wrestling fan, and we probably know a lot of wrestling fans. We all have friends that are wrestling fans. How many of them are deep into the collector's game that want to do something like that? You always got to take that big business step back and kind of think of that. Where G.I. Joe, on the other hand, Joe fans are more aligned with toys. If you're a G.I. Joe fan, sure, I'm sure. Once again, I'm painting with that big paintbrush, but most G.I. Joe fans, of course, they love the cartoon in the 80s. They grew up with it. It was their bread and butter. But most of those fans, they did buy the toys or they have a connection to the toys. Maybe they still do both. There's very few that watched all the cartoons, absolutely loved the cartoons, but didn't buy the toys. I feel like the G.I. Joe brand is very connected with the toy base, where wrestling fans aren't as connected. Obviously, there's exceptions to all rules, but I think as a whole, painting with that big brush, I think that's a big piece of it there. Joe fans are totally aligned with the toys. Wrestling fans, not so much. Another thing, the G.I. Joe Classified line is fairly new. We've had wrestling figures really nonstop forever. G.I. Joe had a lot of starts, a lot of stops, a lot of different scale changes, things like that. And people of my age bracket that collected the 3 3/4 back in the day, we had a little bit of a rise in the 2000s with the 25th anniversary line. We had a few things dangled at us from there. But this is our first 6-inch scale modernized G.I. Joe line. We are so excited for this. Joe fans are excited for this. And the Dragonfly, guess what? That is a pivotal part of a G.I. Joe collection. In G.I. Joe, it's about the figures, but it's always been about play sets and vehicles. Well, guess what? If you're not really familiar with G.I. Joe, the Dragonfly is the #1 copter in the G.I. Joe land. I know some may argue the Tomahawk. I would argue that. I love the Tomahawk. I prefer Tomahawk to the Dragonfly. But most old school Joe fans, I would say, would tell you the Dragonfly is more iconic. So we got an extremely iconic vehicle in the Dragonfly versus the WCW stage. Very iconic once again. The most eyes in wrestling history was on the Monday Night Wars, of course. But taking that step back, how many people that are buying these things, doing these things, want the Nitro stage compared to the Joe fans that want something like the Dragonfly? And I guarantee if it was the Mauler, it was any other vehicle for the most part in the same dollar bracket, we're going to talk dollars and cents here in a little bit, if they were in that bracket, it would have funded. People want their Joes, and we want vehicles for our G.I. Joe Classified. Not everybody that collects wrestling wanted a stage. It's just not in the cards, and it doesn't have the room. That's the other big thing, is people do not have the room for a stage. We talked about how big it is. Thing about stages, it's pretty much you put it together, you lay it down, it's pretty much going to stay there. Yes, you can move it if you want to, but it's a lot of work. Dragonfly, very big. However, you pick that thing up with one hand, you move it over to the table over here. It is easy to move around, so that's another thing. Yes, it's big. Yes, it's going to take some space, but you can move it around. The other thing with the Dragonfly, if you want to, you can hang it from the ceiling. You could figure something out like that. It's not going to take real estate. Nitro stage, you're stuck taking a lot of real estate. That's just the dollars and cents of that aspect of it all over there. One big difference between these two things is the Nitro stage, they pretty much laid out, here is how it's going to go. We got 11,000 for the final stretch. Here's the tiers. There it is. That's what it's going to be. Of course, they did pivot. They mixed some things around. Some would say it was too little, too late, but the cards were all out there. G.I. Joe Dragonfly, a whole different story. We do know 10,000 to back this thing got done just like that. We're dangerously close. Who knows? By the time this video lands, we may have Ripcord, the first unlockable, funded. Well, they have said, here's more unlockables to come with these numbers. Now, the thing is, they didn't put their cards out. They never said who it's going to be. So there's an era of mystery there. There's an era of mystery. People are saying, oh my gosh, who could it be? What could it be? Joe fans are very excited for these things. They're very excited, where I don't know if wrestling fans would like that Easter egg dangled out there that it's, you know, what is it going to be? What is it going to be? Because I can just see people, and it seems like the wrestling fan complains a little bit more than the G.I. Joe fan. Now, G.I. Joe fans complain a lot. There is a lot of people complaining about this, but it does feel to me there was more people complaining on wrestling. And I think that goes back to, I think there is as a whole more wrestling fans that are throwing their 2 cents in that would have never bought this in the first place, where the Joe fans, most that are into groups and things like that, most of them are buying things like this. Where wrestling, there's a lot of people looking from afar, and I don't know, it just could come down to wallets as well, as I think the wrestling fan is cheaper. Once again, hate paint with that big brush, but you got so many more eras of wrestling fan in the mix of this one, where the G.I. Joe fan, it's pretty much people my age, around this age, or whatever. There's not a lot of little kids collecting G.I. Joe classified figures. There's a few, I'm sure there is, but as a whole, it is the adult collector out there that have the nostalgia of the past, where wrestling, entirely different. You have all ages collecting wrestling figures. So there's some differences there. But of course, I think it is the value, the dollar amount, because you have tons of kids that are collecting this, all the way up to college kids playing with these things, doing that. They don't have the money, their parents aren't going to break down, get them the money to buy something like this, or they didn't even know about it in the first place. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, where once again, the Joe fan is older, has their own money, makes their own decisions, they can fund it like that. Another big aspect of this thing is the Dragonfly. Guess what? It is truly an army builder. There was tons of Dragonflies. So a G.I. Joe fan, of course, my age bracket, this age bracket, let's say 30 to 50 year olds, we'll call it that bracket. They have more disposable income. They might buy 2, they might buy 3 of these. They hang different ones off the ceiling. Guess what? The Nitro stage, nobody's buying multiple Nitro stages for their display to play with. Maybe they're buying more to flip, keep one on card, one off card. But there's people buying 4, 5, 6 of these Dragonflies because they're army building them. They want them for their universe. They have a center of the universe Joe display. The Dragonfly is going to be a big part of it. So we got to remember that in all of this as well. Now let's talk a little bit of pricing here. Now the Dragonfly, $275, a lot of money, but not as much as the Nitro stage at $400. Now let's think about that. Remember the Nitro stage, we needed 5,000 backers to get that bad boy even started. Just to start it, we needed 5,000. Dragonfly, you need 10,000. We need to double the amount. Talked about it before. It's all about putting the pieces together. Guess what? The more units you make of anything, we could be talking food, clothing, toys in this example, the more you make, the cheaper it is. Joe, the Joe team, Hasbro, they knew, hey, here's how successful the Hiss was. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to 10,000 with this one. This is the minimum order quantity we need. They knew they were in that ballpark there, where the Nitro stage, they knew it was a bigger squeeze there. They went to 5,000. Now, if the Nitro stage would have went to 10,000, said, here's where we start, 10,000, they probably could have started at a cheaper price, just like the G.I. Joe one did. But I think they did the research. You assume they did the research. And Mattel's a big company. Come on, they do market research. They do all that kind of stuff. I know people are like, they don't do this, they don't do that. They definitely do a lot of that stuff. Whether or not they make the right decision from there, they definitely do take the temperature, just like Hasbro does. So the Hasbro said we can get away with 10,000. Nitro stage with Mattel, they thought 5,000. Nitro didn't work out, of course. G.I. Joe blew it out of the water right away. So what happens in the next crowdfund for G.I. Joe? Does it go higher than that? Does it go a bigger vehicle? I guess that's down the road. We'll see what happens with that one there. But the more units you produce, the cheaper it is. And that's what they did with the Dragonfly. They said, we'll start at 10,000. It could be $275. If they would have started at 5,000, probably would have been $400 or $500, just like the Nitro one. That's just the way it's going to go. And of course, you got the naysayers out there. This shouldn't cost this. This shouldn't cost that. By no means am I going to say I'm an expert, but I know none of us watching this video is an expert on the cost of things like that. One thing you got to remember with the WWE and the Mattel stuff, guess what? They have to pay a percentage of that to the talent. I don't know what it is. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Would Rey Mysterio, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior's family, Scott Steiner, WWE as a whole for Nitro, how much piece of a pie do they get of the total sales? That has to be put into that $500. Guess what? Hasbro, they own the G.I. Joe license. They don't have any of that extra money they have to pay to properties and talents and things like that. They own the G.I. Joe brand, so they don't have that. They can make it cheaper because they don't have those costs. If they did have those costs where somebody owned the Dragonfly, there was a real wild bill and they had to pay these people, guess what? It might have been $500 for the Dragonfly, but we didn't have that issue because of how the cards landed on that one. So you always got to remember that business, step back a little bit on stuff like that. So I want to make sure I put that one out there as well. But anytime you have less units, it's going to cost more money. And like I said, that goes for anything that goes on there. So that's a quick one. That's 15 minutes. I probably talked enough. That's just some free-flowing things I just thought of off the top of my head. Of course, there's more reasons. I know a lot of people, the easy thing is to say, Mattel doesn't know the fan base. They don't know what we want, all that. There's a lot more to it than that. And you got to admit, Rey Mysterio, Scott Steiner, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, some of the biggest guys ever, DDP as well. some of the most popular characters ever. But on the same time, Dragonfly, one of the most popular flight vehicles, we'll call it flight, helicopter, planes, whatever. The Dragonfly is iconic. Wild Bill is iconic. That mustache, those two pistols, man, oh man, that's iconic too. So iconic things, but I think it just comes down to the fan base and where the fan base is financially at this time in 2023 and where the nostalgia glasses are. I think it's definitely in the corner as clearly shown by the G.I. Joe team. Not as many people resonate with the Nitro stage. Not as many people have room. Not as many people want that. And I think like some of the stuff I talked about in this video, that proves the reason why. So that's my early thoughts on the two. Really, it isn't apples to apples. There's a little crossover, but it is totally different. And like I said at the beginning, I don't think there's a ton of crossover in the fan base. Of course, there's people watching this, oh, I buy both. But as a whole, I don't think there is a ton. I mean, it'd be another market research thing, which I'm not paying money to do, but I think that's a big part of it. So there it is. That's the difference between the Nitro and the Dragonfly as I see it live from a beautiful Hilton property in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Shout out to South Dakota. But let me know in the comments down below your guys' thoughts on this. Of course, there's more thoughts to add. Of course, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you just take the big step back. Hasbro funded, Mattel did not. That's where we finish it up. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Let me know your comments down in the comment section below. Of course, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the old notification bells. We got videos every single day and then some. And even more content for you, including early access to videos like this over on the Patreon channel. So check out the old Patreon, your best way to support the channel. You can also support the channel at ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson, and don't forget social media. SirPaul64 on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So from South Dakota, I'm Kyle. See you guys all real soon.